Night covered the alien forest like a heavy blanket, and Mark Hawley ran through it with every bit of strength he had left. His boots crashed through tall red grass, and branches cut his face as he pushed forward. He did not look back. He already knew what was behind him. He had heard their cries many times tonight. Those cries belonged to the hunters. And they were close. The twin moons gave almost no light now, hiding behind thick clouds that moved like slow giants above the trees. Mark's breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. He had not planned to be here. He had not planned to run for his life on a strange world far from Earth. But the moment he saw the glowing eyes in the dark, he knew he had no choice. A deep growl rose from the trees behind him. Then another, and another. Mark's heart pounded so hard he thought it would break through his chest. He could hear the hunters moving fast, silent, deadly. Their feet barely touched the ground. Their claws scraped the stones. Their breath was hot and rough, like steam from a boiling pot. Just keep moving, he told himself, even though he knew he was talking to no one. His legs were shaking. His lungs burned. Sweat fell into his eyes. But he ran. He jumped over a fallen tree and landed hard, almost losing his balance. The hunters howled. The sound cut through the night like a knife. It was a signal, a call to tell the others where he was. Now all of them knew. Mark wanted to scream, but he saved his breath for running. Ahead of him, the forest seemed endless, but something caught his eye. A sharp shape against the darkness. A jagged black mouth opening between two giant rocks. Cave. It had no light, no warmth, no welcome. But it had something he needed more than anything right now, cover. He ran toward it as fast as he could. Behind him, he heard the hunters crashing through the trees. They were faster than he was, and they were getting closer. He could hear their claws hitting the ground. He could hear their teeth snapping. He could almost feel their shadows reaching for him. Mark pushed himself harder. His legs screamed in pain, but he forced them to move. The cave grew closer. Just a few more steps. Then he tripped. His boot caught on a root, and he fell face first into the dirt. Pain shot through his knees and elbows. His flashlight slipped from his hand and rolled away. For one terrible moment, he could not breathe. The hunters howled in excitement. They had seen him fall. Mark crawled forward, fingers digging into the dirt. He grabbed his flashlight and pulled himself back to his feet. He forced his body into motion, each step a battle. He reached the cave's mouth and stumbled inside. Instant. Darkness swallowed him. The air was cold and still. The only sound was his own heartbeat echoing inside his ears. He pressed his back against the wall, trying to calm his breath, trying not to make noise. He knew the hunters might follow him inside. He knew they might be only seconds away. The cave was silent. Too silent. Mark slowly lifted his flashlight and turned it on. The weak beam shook in his trembling hand and cut through the blackness. Then he froze. There was someone else inside the cave. A tall figure pressed against the far wall. A woman, an alien woman, with silver skin and bright blue eyes that reflected his light like glass. She held two small children close, her arms wrapped tightly around them. She was wounded, scared, crying silently. Mark's fear grew. Because now he understood. He was not the only one hiding from the hunters tonight. Mark stood frozen in the cave, his flashlight shaking in his tired hand. The beam of light revealed the alien woman's face clearly now, smooth silver skin, eyes like glowing blue crystals, and deep lines of fear across her cheeks. Her two children hid behind her, their small bodies trembling. The cave was so quiet that Mark could hear the tiny sound of water dripping somewhere far inside. Outside, the hunters prowled through the forest, but he forced himself to stay still and silent. One wrong sound could bring them running. The alien woman didn't move. She only stared at the human who had suddenly fallen into her hiding place. Her long dark hair hung over one shoulder, and her breaths came in careful, weak whispers. Mark could see the wound on her side, dark blood, soaking through a torn cloth wrapped around her waist. He raised his hands slowly, trying not to scare her. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." The woman flinched at the sound of his voice, but she did not run. She glanced toward her children, then back at him. Mark noticed that her eyes were wide with fear, but not fear of him. Fear of what was outside. The hunters. She lifted one hand and pointed at his flashlight, then shook her head quickly with urgent eyes. Mark understood. "Turn it off." He clicked the light off. The cave dropped back into total darkness. Everything seemed to vanish except the harsh sound of his breathing and the soft, worried whimpers of the children. Mark spoke again, voice low and calm. "I didn't know anyone was here. I was just trying to get away." For a long moment, the woman said nothing. Then he heard her gentle voice from the dark, soft like a cold breeze. "You brought them here," she whispered. "The hunters. They follow movement, breath, blood." Mark felt a chill crawl down his back. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know." The woman let out a weak sigh, the sound full of exhaustion. "You did what you had to do to survive." "I understand." He could hear her shifting slightly, maybe adjusting her position or checking on her children. The kids made a tiny sound, like a whine, and she hushed them softly. Mark swallowed and spoke again. "My name is Mark Allais. I came from the crash site in the valley." There was silence again. Then the woman answered, her voice trembling but polite. "I am Vara, widow of the Kiri tribe." The word widow hit Mark hard, even in the darkness. She continued, voice breaking with sorrow. "My mate died yesterday. The hunters came without warning. They took many. They chased the rest. I ran here with my children. I cannot fight. I can only hide." Mark breathed in slowly. He could feel the pain in her words. He didn't know her people's customs, but sadness was the same across every species. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Vara made a quiet sound of agreement, not wanting to speak more about her loss. The air in the cave grew heavy. The children pressed closer to her, and she wrapped an arm around them. Then the ground vibrated lightly. The hunters were back. Vara tensed. "Quiet," she breathed. "Do not speak." Mark held his breath. He could hear the hunters moving outside the cave entrance, slow footsteps, claws scraping against rock, sniffs of hot, wet breath, searching for smells. The cave trembled as one of the hunters stepped inside. Mark's heart thumped painfully in his chest. He could feel the creature's presence in the darkness. Its breathing was deep, hungry, curious. Vara's hand found his in the dark. Her touch was cold and shaking. Mark squeezed her hand back without thinking, trying to tell her he would not move. The hunter walked deeper. Mark didn't dare to breathe. Vara didn't dare to breathe. Even the children stayed silent. The hunters' claws tapped the stone floor again. It paused, sniffed, turned, and after a long, terrifying moment, it walked back toward the cave entrance. Mark finally let out a slow, quiet breath. But he knew this wasn't over. The hunters would return. And he was now trapped in the darkness with a wounded widow and two terrified children. The silence inside the cave felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. Mark stood perfectly still, afraid even the sound of his heartbeat might give away their hiding place. Vara stayed close beside him, her children pressed tightly against her legs in the dark. No one moved. No one dared. Then the first sound came, a slow, dragging step, like claws scraping over stone. Another step followed, louder, heavier. And then a low growl rolled through the cave, deep enough to make the walls vibrate. The hunters had not left. They were entering the cave again. Mark's body stiffened. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he knew he couldn't, not with Vara and the children behind him. And running would only bring the hunters down on all of them. Vara whispered so quietly it was almost just breath. Do not move, they hunt by sound. Mark nodded, even though she couldn't see him. He swallowed down the fear rising in his throat. The darkness pressed against him from all sides. He couldn't even see his own hands, let alone the monstrous shapes he knew were only a few feet away. A second set of claws entered the cave. Tap, tap, scratched out, then a third. The hunters were spreading out, their slow footsteps echoing like distant thunder. Mark could feel their presence, huge, cold, patient. He imagined their long jaws and sharp teeth. He imagined their glowing eyes cutting through the dark. Vara's children trembled quietly. One gave a tiny whimper. The sound was so small. But the hunters heard it. Every creature inside the cave froze. A growl rose from the darkness, deep and sharp. One hunter moved toward the sound. Mark felt the ground shake a little with each step it took. He could tell the creature was only a few feet away now. He could almost feel the hot breath from its nostrils brushing his face. Vara placed her hand over her child's mouth, trying to calm the shaking. Mark wanted to help but dared not even shift his weight. The hunter sniffed the air. Once, twice. Again. Mark's heart raced so fast he feared he might faint. He held himself against the wall, praying for silence. The hunter leaned closer. Mark could hear its thick tongue move, tasting the air. Each breath from the creature blew warm, moist. Winged across his cheek. Mark felt his muscles tighten until they ached. The hunter was going to find them. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed from the deeper part of the cave. Something falling. Something small. Maybe a rock. Maybe a loose piece of old bone. Whatever it was, it fell at the perfect moment. The hunter jerked its head toward the sound and let out a loud growl. The other hunters answered, their voices filling the cave like a storm. Mark silently thanked the darkness. The hunters turned away from Vara and the children, moving deeper into the cave to investigate the sound. Their claws clicked over stone, their grunts fading into the tunnel ahead. But they were not leaving. They were searching. Vara leaned close to Mark and whispered softly into his ear. They will explore every part. They think something hides here. They will not leave until they are sure. Mark felt a sharp knot of worry grow inside his chest. He had hoped the hunters would give up, but Vara knew them better. They were patient killers, slow, careful, smart. Minutes passed like hours. The hunters sniffed every corner of the cave, searched every shadow. Mark could hear them scraping the floor, breathing heavily, tapping the walls. Then one of them growled again, this time angry, frustrated. They hadn't found anything. But they were not satisfied. After a long, tense moment, their footsteps began to retreat, slowly, very slowly. The first hunter left the cave, then the second, then the third. Their heavy steps faded outside, and the night grew quiet again. Mark finally let out a long breath he didn't realize he was holding, but Vara did not relax. She kept her hand on her children and whispered, almost trembling, "They will return. When hunger comes again, they will return." Mark knew then that hiding was not enough. They needed a way out. The cave was quiet again, but it was not a peaceful quiet. It was the kind of quiet that made the skin crawl, the kind that held fear inside it like a cold poison. Mark leaned his back against the rough stone wall and tried to breathe normally. His whole body still shook from the close encounter. He had stared death in the face and survived. But barely. Vara slowly loosened her hold on her children, who still clung to her like frightened shadows. The older child buried his face in her side. The younger held onto her arm with tiny hands that trembled. In the darkness, Vara spoke first. "They will come again," she said softly, her voice thin with exhaustion. "They always come again." Mark swallowed and nodded, though she could not see him. "We can't stay here," he whispered. "We need to find a way out before they return." Vara let out a quiet, broken sigh. "There is no safe way out." The hunters wait for sound, movement, smell. They will watch this cave until hunger pushes them elsewhere, but hunger never leaves them for long. Mark tried to think, but his mind was still foggy from fear and running. His flashlight rested in his hand, turned off, a silent weight reminding him how powerless he felt in the dark. After a long moment, Vara said something that surprised him. "You are not from this world." It was not a question. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "No," Mark answered. "I crashed here. My ship went down in the valley. I've been trying to survive since then." Vara was silent for a few seconds. He heard her shift slightly, maybe adjusting the children so they could rest more comfortably. "My people once believed humans were only a story," she said. "Travelers from the stars with strong hearts and strong bodies, but you are real." He didn't know what to say to that. Then she added quietly, "And I need your help." Her voice held something new now, fear, yes, but also hope. A fragile kind of hope, thin as a thread. "What kind of help?" Mark asked, unsure. Vara hesitated. He could hear her breathing slow, shaky, as if she was gathering courage to speak. "My tribe is gone," she said. "The hunters destroyed our camp. My mate died trying to protect us. My people are dead or scattered. Only my children and I remain." Mark felt a heavy sadness settle on his chest. He could imagine it clearly: fire, screams, running, hiding, losing the person she loved. She must have gone through a nightmare he could barely picture. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Vara continued, and her next words came with difficulty. "I am wounded. I grow weaker every hour. I do not know how long I can stay alive. My children," her voice cracked, "my children will not survive alone." A silence stretched between them. Cold, painful, heavy. Mark understood what she was trying to say, but he waited for her to speak it. Finally she did. "I need someone to protect them. Teach them, guide them. Be the strength that I cannot be anymore." Her voice trembled. "I beg you, human. Please be a father to them." Mark's breath caught. He hadn't expected anything like this. Not now, not in the middle of fear and darkness. "A father?" he repeated softly. "Yes," Vara whispered. "Not to replace my mate, not to take his place in spirit, but to take his place in duty, to keep them alive, to show them a future. My people say humans have brave hearts." Her voice softened into a plea. "Please, let that be true." Mark looked into the darkness where she sat. He imagined her silver skin, her tired eyes, the two small children clutching her hands. They had no one, and he had no purpose left on this world except survival. "If I don't help them," he thought, "who will?" He took a deep breath. "Vara," he said quietly, "I don't know if I can be what they need. But I won't let anything happen to them. I promise that." Vara let out a long, shaky breath, half relief, half sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered. And for the first time since entering the cave, Mark felt the weight of a new responsibility settle on his shoulders, heavy but right. He was no longer alone, and neither were they. The cave stayed silent for a long time after Vara's desperate request. The darkness felt deeper than before, as if the walls themselves were listening. Mark sat quietly, trying to gather his thoughts. His breathing was slower now, but his heart still beat with fear and responsibility. Vara rested one hand on the cold rock, her other hand keeping her children close against her. He could tell she was weak. Her breaths were thin and uneven, her body trembling from pain and loss of blood. Every few minutes she winced softly, trying to hide it from the children. Mark could not see her face in the darkness, but he didn't need to. He felt the weight of her situation pressing against him like the heavy stone walls around them. She had no one left. Her children had no one left. And now, somehow, he was the only thing standing between them and death. He ran a hand along the cave wall, rough and cold. His mind searched for a plan, something that could get them out before the hunters returned. Waiting here was not an option. The creatures would come back hungrier than before, and they would search more carefully next time. "Vara," he whispered, "how far does this cave go?" There was a short pause before she answered. "I have not walked the tunnels. I only stayed near the entrance. I feared getting lost." With the children, Mark nodded in the dark. That made sense. But he needed more information. "Do your people know the cave?" he asked. "My mate did," she whispered. "He said an old tunnel exists. It leads to a river. If we reach the river, the hunters will lose our scent." That was good news, better than he expected. "That tunnel," Mark asked, "do you know where it starts?" Vara hesitated. He could hear her shifting slightly on the stone floor. "It should be near the back of this cave," she said. "A narrow place where the rock bends like a broken wing." She paused, then added, "But it is small. Only crawling is possible. Crawling with children. While injured. While hunters might return." Mark felt stress tightening his shoulders, but he knew it didn't matter. Crawling was still better than dying here. He turned on his flashlight for half a second, just a blink, just enough to find the nearest wall and not enough to draw attention from outside. Then he pressed his hand along the cold stone, guiding himself deeper into the cave. His footsteps were slow and careful. Small stones cracked softly beneath his boots. Vara followed behind him, her children moving quietly, touching the wall. As they walked, as they moved deeper, the air grew colder and damper. The floor shifted downward. The smell of wet rock grew stronger. Then Mark saw a faint, thin gap in the wall. The shape was exactly as Vara had described it, like a broken wing, bent and tight. He crouched down and shined his flashlight for the shortest possible moment. The tunnel was narrow. Very narrow. No one could stand inside it. They would have to crawl on hands and knees the entire way. Mark turned back toward Vara. "Found it," he whispered. She let out a soft breath, tired, but full of relief. Mark studied the opening again, running his fingers along the edges. It was tight, but he could fit. The children were small enough to move through easier. Vara, however, she was taller and injured. He walked back to her quietly. "I'll go first," he said. "I'll check if the path is safe. Then I'll help pull the children through." Vara nodded. "And I will follow after." Her voice held courage, but he could hear the pain hidden inside it. Before entering the tunnel, Vara reached for something at her waist. Mark heard a soft click, like metal shifting. Then she held out a small crystal blade, transparent, glowing, faintly blue. "My mate's knife," she whispered. "It is all we have left that can harm the hunters. Take it. Protect the children with it." Mark wrapped his hand around the blade. It was cold, lighter than he expected, but strong. "I will," he said. The hunters would return. Their time was running out. Mark knelt in front of the narrow passage. "Let's move," he whispered. Then he crawled into the darkness ahead, carrying the crystal knife and the future of a family that was now depending entirely on him. The narrow tunnel swallowed Mark as soon as he entered. The walls pressed close against his shoulders, and the ceiling forced him to crawl on hands and knees. His breath echoed in the tiny space, sounding too loud, too alive, too easy for hunters to hear if they came near. Behind him, Vara whispered soft instructions to her children. "Stay close. Touch the wall. Follow my voice. We will be safe." Her words were calm, but Mark could hear the strain behind them: pain, fear, and something deeper. A mother's desperate will. Mark kept his flashlight off, relying only on his free hand to feel ahead. His other hand held the crystal knife. Its cold glow faint enough not to attract attention, but bright enough that he could see the nearest inch of rock. He moved forward slowly. Crawling was harder than he thought. The wet stone scraped his palms. His elbows hit sharp edges. His knees throbbed with each push. The tunnel twisted like a snake, never straight, never smooth. After a few minutes, He whispered over his shoulder. "I'm still here. Keep coming." Vara answered softly. "We are behind you." Her voice sounded weaker now. The wound on her side must have been bleeding again, but she hid the pain from her children. A faint rumble shook the tunnel. Mark froze. He listened. A second rumble followed. Then a low, distant howl. The hunters. They had returned to the cave. Mark's heart thudded. They needed to move faster. He pushed forward again, crawling as quickly as he dared. The children behind him made little sounds, grunts, small gasps, but they stayed quiet enough not to draw attention. Vara whispered comfort to them. Even though each movement must have stabbed her with pain, the tunnel shifted downward suddenly. Mark slid a little before catching himself. Water dripped from above, hitting the back of his neck with cold, sharp drops. The air grew tighter here, stale, hard to breathe. Mark whispered, "Careful, the floor dips." He felt Vara guide the children gently. "We follow. Keep moving." Minutes passed like hours. The tunnel seemed endless. Mark's arms ached, his throat was dry, and sweat dripped into his eyes. He wondered how long they had been crawling. 5 minutes? 10? 20? Time felt strange in this cramped, airless darkness. Another howl echoed. This one was closer. Mark clenched the crystal knife tighter. "Faster," he whispered. He crawled as quickly as he could without making noise. The tunnel narrowed again, the ceiling brushing his back. He flattened himself as much as possible and pushed through inch by inch. Behind him, the younger child whimpered. Vara whispered, "She little one, almost there." But Mark knew she didn't know if almost was true. None of them did. Then suddenly, he felt something change. The air ahead was fresher, cooler, moving slightly, like a tiny wind. He whispered loudly enough for them to hear, "There's an opening. I think we're close." Hope sparked in the tunnel. Mark crawled faster. His hands slid into a space where the floor dropped away slightly. The tunnel widened enough for him to kneel. He lifted his head and saw a faint silver glow. Moonlight. "We're close," he said again, louder this time. Vara let out a shaky breath of relief. But then a sound came from behind them. A sharp scratch, a heavy sniff, a deep growl. Mark's blood turned cold. The hunters had reached the tunnel entrance. Vara whispered urgently, "They smell us. Move." Mark grabbed the rock edges and pulled himself forward with all his strength. The tunnel opened into a small pit with a crack of moonlight shining down. He climbed out fast and turned back to help the children. The older child crawled out first, shaking but silent. Mark lifted him up to the rocky ledge. The younger child came next, crawling awkwardly. Mark pulled him free just as a roar echoed inside the tunnel. He reached back for Vara. Her hand found his, but her grip was weak. "Come on," Mark whispered loudly. She tried to push forward, but her injured side made her slow. She gasped in pain as she crawled. The hunters roared again, their claws scraping closer. Mark reached deeper into the tunnel, grabbed Vara under her arms, and pulled with every ounce of strength he had. She slid out just as a sharp claw scraped the stone inches. Behind her, Mark and Vara collapsed onto the rock floor, gasping, but they were out, and the hunters were now trapped behind them. For the moment, moonlight touched Mark's face as he pulled Vara out of the narrow tunnel. His lungs burned, his arms shook, and sweat stung his eyes, but he did not stop. The air outside felt cold and fresh, almost like freedom. But he knew better. Freedom was still far away. The two children clung to each other, shaking as the night wind brushed against their faces. Vara lay on her side, gripping the rocky ground, trying to slow her breathing. The wound at her waist had opened again, and dark blood stained the stones beneath her. Mark crouched beside her. "Can you stand?" he whispered. Vara nodded weakly and pushed herself up. She winced, but she did not complain. A low growl echoed from the tunnel behind them. Mark turned his head slowly. Glowing yellow eyes stared back from the darkness. The hunters had reached the opening. One hunter's claws scratched the stone as it tried to widen the gap. Broken pieces of rock fell to the ground. Another pair of eyes appeared behind it. They were digging themselves out. They had no time. Mark grabbed Vara's arm gently. "We need to move, now." Vara nodded and gathered her strength. She lifted her children with her trembling arms and held them close as she followed Mark down the rocky slope. The ground dipped toward the sound of rushing water. Then they reached it, a wide river shining silver under the moon, its surface moving fast and loud. Mist rose from the water, catching the moonlight and painting the whole. Seen in a soft glow, the children stared at it in awe. Vara breathed a small sigh of relief. "The hunters hate water," she whispered. "They will not cross." Mark looked back. Claws and teeth were already pushing through the tunnel opening. One hunter squeezed halfway out, snapping at the air. Another pushed behind it, snarling impatiently. "They won't have to cross," Mark said. "They just have to reach us." Vara tried to move faster, but her legs faltered. Mark stepped to her side and put his arm under hers, helping her walk. Her breath hitched in pain, but she stayed focused. They reached the riverbank. The children held onto Vara tightly, behind them. The first hunter broke free from the tunnel. A second one followed. Howling into the night, Mark turned and put himself between the family and the beasts. He drew the crystal knife Vara had given him. Its faint blue glow shone in the dark like a star. The hunters growled deeply, their eyes fixed on him. Their bodies were huge, lean muscle and bone, covered in dark fur, jaws lined with sharp teeth. They looked like nightmares given shape. Mark knew he could not outrun them. He knew he could not fight them all. But he did not step back. He braced, his feet holding the knife tightly. He had made a promise. The first hunter lunged. It moved like lightning, a blur of claws and teeth. Mark jumped aside and slashed with the knife. Blue sparks burst as the blade cut into the creature's leg. The hunter let out a roar of pain and stumbled backward. The second hunter attacked from the left. Mark raised his arm to block it, but the creature knocked him off his feet. He hit the ground hard, the air leaving his lungs. The hunter opened its jaws to bite, but a flash of bright blue light exploded behind Mark. Vara. She had raised her hand, and a burst of energy shot from the crystal necklace around her neck. The light blinded both hunters. They howled and staggered, shaking their heads. Her voice, weak but fierce, echoed across the riverbank. "Stay away from my children." Mark used the moment. He jumped up and drove the knife into the ground between the two beasts, the shock of the blow sending blue energy cracking across the stones. The hunters recoiled, frightened and wounded. One growled and backed away. The other turned and ran. The river roared beside them. The moon shone. The hunters disappeared into the forest, their howls fading into the night. Silence settled. Mark breathed heavily, shaking from the fight. He wiped sweat and dirt from his face. Vara lowered her arm, the glow fading from her necklace. She sank to her knees, exhausted. The children rushed to her, hugging her tightly. Mark walked toward them, the crystal knife still in his hand. Vara looked up at him. Her blue eyes shone with more than relief. There was gratitude, deep and full. "Mark Hale," she whispered, voice trembling. "You saved us. You saved my children. You kept your promise." Mark knelt beside them, breathing hard. The children looked at him with wide, hopeful eyes. He placed the knife gently on the ground. "You're safe now," he said. "I'm here. I won't leave." Vara touched his hand with her trembling fingers. "Then you are their father now. And we are your family." Mark looked at the river, then at the forest, then at the small family beside him. He felt something settle inside him, warm, solid, right. "Let's find our future," he said softly. And together, they walked along the riverbank, leaving the darkness behind and stepping into whatever tomorrow would bring.